How have you been?
I've been doing good. It's good to talk to you
Cool.
again.
Good to talk with you as well. I
I
guess the last
appreciate.
time we saw each other was the live Limbo record release at that record store in Decatur.
Yeah, sure was. Yep, that was
Really good room.
yeah. I was able to. I had some free time. I was able to come by and take a look. Since then, Henry's releasing or just about to release the the studio recording we did at Mitch Easter's drive-in studio.
That's awesome.
He was showing me the album art for it today.
Yeah, he sent
So,
me a couple of them to like design and stuff, so I've been
oh yeah.
coloring them a bit. But yeah, I'm excited to hear the rest of it. I know he put one of those songs out already, Bombay, which
Oh yeah, yeah. I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
there was a. Well, you read this. There was a recording studio back in the I guess the late 70s, early 80s called Bombay Studio in Marietta. And R.E.M. had recorded there. And, and that's kind of how everybody else found out about it. And before I joined the band, apparently they had recorded a few songs there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And how deep into the existence of the band did you join?
Oh, I was the final third of the band. Uh,
Cool.
it started with another guitar player. Her name is Margarita Bilbao. She's from Spain. And after she left, um, a local guy named Tim Lacey took over, and Tim and I were friends, and I hung out with the band because I thought they were really cool at the time. And when Tim decided to go full time into his other band, which was called Art in the Dark, we transitioned. He spent a couple of days showing me the songs, and then I took off from there. And
That's cool.
yeah.
And who was like some of your main influences when you like came to guitar playing?
Oh well, I got my first guitar when I was 12, and that was like right smack in the 70s. So it was, the first songs I ever remember were like The House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah.
I remember that was like the one people were trying to do. But as I got older and came into like really wanting to play it for my own reasons, um, also being the 70s, I was a real big fan of Kiss.
Hmm.
Like Kiss shirt.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, I love them. You know, being a 15-year-old kid, watching them do the stuff they did, but also it just happened to be, a really great time in music because there were all these massive bands well, Led Zeppelin was one of them, and Aerosmith, and but when I was listening to them, I wasn't thinking about playing music and trying to play like them. It wasn't until I heard Neil Young and his band Crazy Horse, his electric stuff, when I
Yeah.
realized that I really liked the way he played the guitar, the scratchy parts that he would play, the way he had a really unique strumming pattern. He still does. Um, but something about that really spoke to me. And when I listened, I went through and learned all the Neil Young songs.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and that was back when you'd have to lift the needle on the record and play it and listen to it, try to get it, and then pull it back and do it again. You'd spend all day trying to learn one little section of a song. But that's
Hmm.
how I learned all the songs at the time. But Neil Young was a big fan until the Sex Pistols came to Atlanta and everything flipped.
And you saw that show?
Nope, no, they were in Atlanta as the first show, but that first album, never mind the Bollocks,
Yeah,
that just that really just changed everything for me as a teenager, in Atlanta,
totally.
and then hearing the Clash, and then I got to Athens in 1979, and I heard the B-52s. I couldn't believe it, and it made me change the way I was interested in the guitar. Um, I was there in Athens a whole year before I did anything music wise. Um, I was a sophomore before I met the guys in Limbo District and other bands. But once I did, it just kind of then my guitar, people I was really interested in. The one I really loved was Vic Barney with the Method Actors.
Oh
I love
yeah,
the
they're
way I
cool.
love the way he played the guitar. And my good friend Mark Klein and Love Tractor,
Hmm.
um, he was really smooth. I could never get his licks down, but because I had a different kind of wilder approach, less. I mean, everybody's style is based on their ability. And I'm paraphrasing something Keith Richards said. The way you play is based on your limitations, and my limitations is how I ended up playing. That's how I can play big strums, not super delicate riffs. Um, but I always appreciated the guys that could. But I really liked Vic Varney's approach. Oh, and then I don't know, probably my favorite of all was Randy Bewley
Cool.
in Pylon. He had
Yeah.
he had a sound that I never could even figure out how he got it. Um, but I saw all the bands back then that were coming through town, and Pete Buck had a really great technique on the picking and strumming on his Rickenbacker, but I was half power chording it from like Led Zeppelin riffs to um, being scratchy like Neil Young to then trying to figure out what all these other guys were doing. I mean, it's a lifelong chase trying to find a sound or something that you can do that you can reproduce that you're happy with. But it's like, well, for me, I was never happy with my sound or the way I played. Um,
Yeah.
Within 5 years of leaving college, I probably put the guitar down and I didn't pick it up again for 10 years.
Dang,
It's
really.
just, it's just, the frustration. It's like, well, I don't play golf, but I hear people say golf's the same way. It's so hard to play well that you constantly want to keep doing it and it's all about practice, but it still kicks your ass every time. And
For sure.
but I always felt like I was failing as a guitar player. But uh, but my when I did play and it all sounded good. Like that's funny you mentioned that live album because I hear it and some of it I think, oh man, some of this should never seen the light of day. I mean, I can hear I'm off. One of us, and it's not. I'm not on that album. It's all three of us playing. Margarita's playing, Tim's playing, I'm playing on some of the songs. But all live albums are always iffy. You
Yeah.
you hear about people taking live albums and having them mixed, and they'll like put them through Pro Tunes and Pro Tools, and like they'll correct all the mistakes and everything. And this one is just all the mistakes are right there.
Yeah.
It's
That's what I feel like makes a live album though, is hearing those kind of just like, maybe those little imperfections that, just like if you didn't know that that's not the way the band was supposed to play, it just sounds like this
Yep.
cool, like little, like, additive maybe.
Yep, and it's the limitations of the instruments.
For real.
I mean, we had a bunch of old stuff. I had an old Gibson SG. Davey played a PV bass, right off the rack from Guitar Center, and we had a 1960s Farvisa organ
Yeah.
that like kind of works, and all the valves and stuff and switches. That thing was crazy.
That sounds
Old.
great on record. It's crazy
Oh yeah,
sounding.
the organ actually comes across the best out of everything. For some reason, the oldest, most decrepit instrument has the best sound. Um, Lost to time. That machine's long gone. But um, yeah, I've always been a guitar driven music. I've always been interested in guitar driven music. Like I was
Yeah.
listening, I don't know why, I was listening to Devo yesterday,
Hmm.
and I remember as a kid when I first heard him, I remember thinking, man, those guitars are really heavy. Like, and then I noticed as I was watching them, going through the rabbit hole of YouTube, that they're really heavy into guitars and distortion and guitar solos, and I think that's just the
Yeah.
kind of thing that's always appealed to me. It's a real, maybe it's a millennial thing, maybe it's a 70s, 80s thing. I don't know. Not as many guitar solos nowadays. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, no, I definitely I've seen that. Maybe Kurt Cobain told everyone you can't play it, and so everyone just kind of was like, all right.
I don't
But
know, but I mean, he had some of the coolest guitar solos,
yeah.
but nobody's really coming out with even guitar bands don't have guitar solos.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. It's just people there, usually with just like a, rhythm section. It's like you got two rhythm guitars. No one's really like trying to experiment outside of that,
Yeah.
yeah. Are there any current bands that you're like listening to?
Oh yeah, there was I really dug this band out of Portland. They were called Lithics. I don't know if there's a the in front of it, but I just read they broke up at the end of last year.
Oh yeah.
Been around maybe 10 years, but they had a real quirky rhythmic on rhythmic sound that reminded me of Pylons,
Mhm.
um, with a really interesting singer, and I don't know her name. I really dug them. Uh, there was this other band also out of Portland called
Wimps.
Wimps,
Cool.
and I mean, I guess you could say, I don't know. Some people might say they're like dad rock, but it's just a three piece
Mhm.
that they play really tight, fast, um, you know, punkish music, and lyrics that have a story, and they do it with a smile and a smirk. I mean, they don't hate anybody, it's that's the anti-punk part of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, they're just, I don't know. I think I say they're fun, maybe. Um, but other bands I've been listening to, I mean, I usually just put on Spotify and hit like, somebody's mix, like Wilco's mix or something, and just listen to what's
Mhm.
playing. Um, I, I really like hearing music I've heard before,
Yeah.
but there are some new artists that I like, and maybe they're not so new. Um, and I don't even know if I can remember their names. My older son and my wife always show me and play songs for me.
That's cool.
Um, um, but it's more like in the hip hop genre,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I don't really retain these band names as much anymore as the classics. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, nobody really steps out band wise. Um, I mean, in the last couple of years, there's this band out of Australia called the Chats.
Oh yeah, the chats are cool.
Yeah, those guys are, yeah, they're
They're
fun.
wild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
wild. Um, I like I mean, they're not nihilists or anything. They're just having fun. I mean, I don't know. I like their sense. Um,
Mhm.
and then that band from the Isle of Wight that everybody loves. I can't tell you what they're called, but they've had some hits, and I don't know what hits are anymore. It's funny. A friend of mine, um, Linda Hopper she was in OK, and now she's in another band called, um, you'll have to insert this here for me, but
Yeah.
it's like a 10-year-old band, but 15 years old. But she told me one time that, if you sell 10,000 units, that's considered punk rock gold. That's a
Yeah,
gold
I've heard
record.
that before.
Like, yeah, you can sell
It's a good
10,000
one.
records, that's punk rock gold instead of a million records, right? Because nobody's buying records anyway.
Mm-mm.
Um, but I'm open to hearing new things, but most of what I hear that's new, I can't get past
Yeah.
30, 60 seconds of it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I have a real short fuse on those. I, I'm,
Yeah, no, for sure.
I want to hear what I want to hear, and I'm not hearing it. I like the Melvins a lot.
Yeah,
They've been
Melvins are
around
awesome.
forever, right? I love listening to the Melvins. They always cheer me up.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, when I try
Well,
to like follow that rhythm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how Dale drums like that. It's wild,
No,
but
no. I mean, but stuff like that is fun and it shakes you up.
totally.
Um, but I mean, then there's a whole list of like classic rock artists that fill the rest of my ears, because it's kind of like eating comfort food.
No, definitely. And it's like most of the bands that I listen to are yeah from like the 60s to like the 90s. It's like just feels like stuff just kind of either's been done before or it's just kind of regurgitating old stuff. But do you think that that is true, or do you think that I don't know, there's still more kind of boundaries to explore with like guitar driven music specifically, I guess?
Um, I think there is worlds to explore with guitars, but there's no place to play it anymore.
Yeah.
You used to get it on the radio. You can maybe hear it on Spotify, but I mean, Spotify, you have to know what you're looking for. I
Yeah.
mean, and unless you have the the intellectual curiosity to chase it down and find it
Yeah.
and go to the places where it lives,
Hmm.
and go to clubs where it might be coming through. Oh, there is a
Yeah.
band out of Athens I really loved. I don't know if they're around anymore. They were called
Yeah.
Motherfucker.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to do an interview. You're good, dude.
There's a
All right. Bye.
there was
Sorry
this
about that. What were
That's
you
all right.
saying?
There was this band from Athens called Motherfucker. Have you ever heard of
That's a
them? Yeah,
great name.
I really like them. And I saw them around a few. I mean, this has been the last 5 years. Actually, I
Yeah.
haven't really been going to clubs since the quarantine. After the fact, it was just kind of, I don't know, kind of pulled the rug out from under me. And I thought, I don't know, I can't get into it right now. But
Yeah.
Henry's part owner of the 529 Club, and they always have cool stuff coming through there.
Yeah.
Like tomorrow night, Saturday, Mary Timony is playing at the Earl.
Okay.
And if you don't know much about her, she's been in tons of indie bands. She's a really cool guitarist. She's just a regular person that like rocks on the guitar.
That's
She's a
awesome.
merge artist, and I think tonight is Merge Fest and that area up there. And I think she's playing at Merge Fest. I went to the 25th Merge Fest. This is the 35th Merge Fest they have every year. But she's a merge artist, and they play there. Speaking of merge artists, I've always liked Super Chunk.
Oh
I've
yeah.
always I've always appreciated their lineups and their lyrics, and I
Totally.
like how they've been able to like keep that going. Well, it helps owning a record company to keep your band going, and they have a record company, and they don't appear to have lost their interest and curiosity about new bands. You can always go through their catalog and find something cool and go, I've
Mhm.
never heard that, and play it. Now, plus they have all the, their other artists that they've had over the years.
For
Um,
sure.
but yeah, guitar bands like Mary Timony, um, Wild Flag from a few years back. Um,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, I think they have. Oh, here's a band that I just remembered. It's called Gnome.
Gnome. Okay.
Gnome, just like the little yard thing.
Yeah.
I think these guys are they're out of Belgium.
Okay.
Um, it's a trio, power trio, and they rock. But they also wear these little gnome hats. These little
Oh,
so
cool.
red. If you ever get a chance, it's like with a G, gnome.
Yeah.
I've really been enjoying their last couple albums.
That's
They're
awesome.
they're crazy. And then like one thing the guitar player does, he's also the singer that hardly anybody does, is he has a couple of YouTube videos where he sits down and he shows you how he plays the song. I mean, like the actual artist, usually it's like a bunch of guys saying, this is how this song is played,
Yeah.
because that's the new way people learn songs. But
Hmm.
this guy just sits there in a chair and shows, no, I do this, and then drop D, and then blah. And you're like,
That's
oh,
so cool.
I know. It's like, oh, that's how you make
Yeah.
things sound. Um, but if you ever get a chance, I really dig Gnome, but it's guitar driven,
Cool.
you know. But yeah, but and when I was in college, we had college music, college radio stations. Um, every record store, like there are now, same record stores almost, but there's just no place except live to hear it, and maybe a certain little window on a college radio station.
Yeah.
Um, I can't hear it right driving around Atlanta on my car.
Yeah. No, college radio is not the same as it used to be. It's like they're just playing just the stuff you would hear on, a just generic top 40. And it's just like, why are you all playing, I guess Mariah Carey is not even popular anymore, but just somebody who's just you wouldn't expect to hear. It's like I want to, I remember WREK used to play all the weird, just experimental
Oh
music, and
yeah,
it was
they
just
were
like,
awesome.
yeah, no, for real. But stuff's
Yeah.
changing.
A friend of mine, Todd Flaharski, I mean, he's in Athens, the YOLO Records.
Hmm.
Um, he used to have a show at WREK. I
Oh,
don't remember.
cool.
I don't remember what it was called, but like I remember, I drove Davey and Dominique from Limbo District to go to a show they were doing with Boat of,
Oh yeah,
and they just filled the studio with a bunch of other musicians. I couldn't even tell you all was there, but it's always um, different guys, and I remember that it was just live, and I
yeah.
was thinking, man, how is REK doing this? this is crazy.
Yeah,
But it was, in that band, if you ever listen to any of their stuff, it's challenging.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
very
remember.
challenging.
Yeah,
Yeah. Which
did
is kind of fun. Yeah.
totally. Yeah,
And um, but now there's nothing like that really. I mean, maybe if I was more plugged in, I would could tell you like, oh yeah, there's all these places, but not that I know of. Yeah.
no, for sure. Yeah, I remember after I think when we met at the record store, you told me about Bodov, and I
Oh
found
yeah.
them on Bandcamp, and yeah, I listened to like all their records. It's super bizarre, just like sound collage stuff, which
It
like
is. Yeah. Tom Smith
yeah,
had a whole career of that.
that's
Um,
cool.
and that and another band called To Live and Shave in L.A.
Yeah, yeah, crazy name.
Yeah. And I mean, he took it all over the world. I think he was in Germany even.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
it's pretty
mean,
wild.
what an opportunity, right? I
Mhm.
remember Buzz from the Melvins one time said that he was living his dream. He's like, I get to play music that I want and make a living at it and do what I want to do. I'm like, what?
Mhm.
I mean, what else is there, really?
Yeah, no, totally.
Like, yeah, if the Melvins think that, that's pretty. I mean, anyway, I think that's how Tom was living, really. Only knew him a little bit, a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always appreciate people who can, well, do it and make a living at it to their standards, so that they can do what they're enjoying. That's what art is, really.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
because you get to doing it is something you can't not do. And when I was younger, that was how everybody in our band felt,
Mhm.
until we didn't. It's just
Yeah.
like it's something you can turn off too sometimes,
Mhm.
and it's hard to get back.
Definitely. Yeah, no. And even when like I mean we all get together sometimes and there's just like, periods or weeks where we're just kind of like not really feeling it and then all of a sudden somebody will like be like, "Oh, I heard this new band the other day." And all of a sudden we're just like kind of checking new stuff out and just kind of being influenced by like some new stuff and kind of like, maybe cause us to write two new songs kind of just like in that style or just kind of like, which yeah.
I like how immediate that is for you. Um, that like you can be like in a room, play it, and it can be reflected in something you put out like right afterwards. It doesn't have to percolate forever.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I'll spend years getting songs to where I'm like, all right, I've got this idea, and then it'll be like 2 years later, it's finally like a song. So it's no, it's tricky and definitely like can be demotivating, I guess sometimes because you'll just be like, am I just kind of replicating what I'm hearing, what I like, and it's
Yeah,
like, I think it can definitely be tough to figure out like how can I make this into something that's new and something that like people haven't heard before and like something that people will want to hear and stuff. But
do you ever listen to your stuff and think, oh, that sounds like something I've already done?
yeah, no, definitely. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, got to scrap that song now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of bands that put out the same stuff, album after album after album.
Yeah.
And it
I've
and
seen several bands that play song after song after song in the live show, and I'm like, wow, I'd probably never gonna listen to you guys just
yeah,
online just because it's just I don't know, but
yeah. Um, Tame Impala comes to mind. For some
yeah,
reason, it all sounds the same. I saw them a few
yeah,
years ago in Atlanta, and I was like,
for sure. And
yeah,
there's like, I know that's like the band where he's like the solo recording artist, and then has the
yeah,
band with him. And yeah, I think that's the band. They like kind of changed. They started doing that like early Beatles or like their early records were kind of trying to do that like Revolver era Beatles style, and
yeah.
it's just gotten more like synthy or just kind of like trying to push it the gloss on the for the pop,
Yeah.
stuff. Which but
I remember I would hear albums, and then I'd hear the next album and think, oh, they're really similar. And then the third album's like, that's usually the one that's completely back-assward from the one before it because they're all sick
yeah,
of it, right? They don't want to keep playing the same thing. And I don't know if that's like because the old homages, you have your whole life to put your first album out, and then you have like a year to put the second one out. If you
yeah,
have a contract, and well, it's funny because this isn't even the way the music business is anymore, but the
yeah.
way it used to
Everyone
be.
just do it
Now you just put
themselves
it
these
out,
days.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was always like the third album is the one where most people lost their record contract.
Yeah,
It was different from the stuff before, and they're trying because everybody gets tired of their stuff. I mean, when I remember, I don't know if there's any credence to it, but part of Kurt Cobain's um, depression was having to sing the same song every night.
yeah,
I mean, I could see that.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And even
Um,
just doing like shows once a month, it's just like, I just played that song a month ago, and it's like we practice it, a couple times a week. It's just like, I don't know. But
yeah. And then other
yeah,
artists are like, yeah, this I love singing this song. This is how I got my house, or that's how
yeah,
I mean, they have a different aspect of it. I mean, the Who has to think like that because otherwise
yeah.
they would all have quit years ago.
Hmm.
I mean,
No, for sure.
because I guess that's, but I really like, it's interesting when you hear a band and then you hear them again, it's like a different band.
Yeah,
Same people, they just play differently. And
definitely.
yeah, I like that. A band I heard a while back and I still listen to is Parquet Courts.
Oh
I
yeah,
think they're
yeah.
out of Brooklyn or somewhere in New York. I really like their sound. But they have like tons of releases. But if you listen to the early ones, they get so different as they get out to the closer ones. I like that. I like hearing progression, I guess. I mean, I'm not
Definitely.
judging them on it. It's like, oh yeah, I like trying something different.
No,
So
for sure.
yeah.
And then like yeah, hearing just how bands will evolve and just kind of like, some bands where it'll just be like a completely different sound from record to record, like genre jumping. And then it's like, yeah, those bands where it's like you can kind of see the slow, just, like I don't know if you've ever heard this band Cows before. They were
Mhm.
they were like this kind of punk blues band that was on like this label Amphetamine Reptile in like the 90s, but they've got like 9 albums I think, and it's like each record is definitely specific to its kind of like, confines, but you can kind of see this progression, but it's not like such a stark thing where it's like, this is like, what were they thinking here? It's like this like very natural feeling kind of like progression, which is definitely respectable, and especially for like, kind of like a noise band, you're just doing it with your friends, not really making that much money. It's cool to see bands that can like put that up for like 10 plus years and just still like find the little ways to kind of like grow and I guess evolve and stuff.
Yeah, that comes to mind is like of Montreal.
Yeah,
I mean that the creative changes in that from just piece to piece is amazing. I don't
for
know how
sure.
people I don't know how I mean I guess that's genius. I don't know how to do that. I can't imagine how you'd be able to do that all the time. It just seems
Yeah,
exhausting.
seem kind of draining. Yeah, exactly. And just kind of like, yeah, using all your creative energy to try and do this, and it's like, oh well, I've done that and that now. It's like, yeah,
Yeah. And now
but
what? Yeah, yeah, where do you
yeah,
go?
no,
Um,
exactly.
I mean, I guess I can see why like people um, like the White Stripes break up because they're just playing the same things all over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I was into the Black Keys for a while, and then they're doing the same thing. They're morphing and changing,
Hmm.
and some of it some of it I'm appreciative of, and others not so much. But I get it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be the same guy forever, the
No, exactly.
same band. And that reminds me of like Annie Clark. I can't remember what she calls herself. Oh, St. Vincent. Like
Hmm.
she's she's an amazing player, and all her songs are so different. Um, I don't know, guitar-driven bands.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you'd mentioned that you kind of put the guitar down for a while. Are you playing any music right now currently?
Um, I'm a I'm a I'm an after hours quiet meditative guitar player.
That's
Um,
awesome.
I've got an old 80s Ovation nylon string guitar that I
Cool.
picked up about 10, 15 years ago. I'd sold all my guitars and my amps and all my, I had a couple of pedals and I got out. I just sold it all. And then I acquired some again. I got interested in it, but it's frustrating. I get
No.
frustrated. And so I sold it all again. I just sold it all. And then I thought, well, I mean, I've always been appreciative as I get older in melodies. Um, unlike, Limbo District had melodies.
Totally.
a lot of organ melodies, and but there was a lot of cacophony, you know, clashing sounds. We tried to make room for each other, you know, instead of like all playing at once. We
Yeah,
tried not to play on top of each other, and you know, and if Davey's here, I try to be here, and
for
you
sure.
know, and the organ finds its spot. Um, but as I got older, I was really into melodies, and then I got into listening to um, jazz guitar music.
Yeah.
An artist like Tal Farlow and um, Charlie Bird. Um, I mean, there's just tons of guys. I like Pat Martino. I mean, I didn't know about him, so I had to catch up. So I went on like a long bender of like catch, you know, listening to it, and then I bought a giant, big Gibson arch top. Actually, it was a Tal Farlow model, um, and got really frustrated playing it and sold
Yeah,
it. Um, and so now I've got my nylon string Ovation, and it does just fine. Um,
that's awesome.
yeah, I can, you know, I revisit things
Mhm.
like memories. Um, Occasionally I hear something in my head that, you know, from like when I was younger, you'd hear something and you have to go put it down, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you know, you spend all day hearing this little melody in your head, and you want to see what it sounds like, see if you can
Hmm.
remember it, see if you can pick it out. And I do that all the time, you know, clandestinely, but
Yeah.
I've got I've got no outlet. Um, my youngest daughter is a classical cellist,
Oh, that's awesome.
and so I get to hear really pretty melodies coming from her
Mhm.
room all the time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do your kids listen to Limbo District at all?
They do now that there's this resurgence over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't think they're whistling it. That's, you know, during the day, but they're now familiar with it, more familiar
Cool.
with it than when I was showing it and playing it for them when they were little. Because
Yeah.
you know, one's 20, one's 18, so
Hmm.
they can appreciate it now. Well, they
For
can
sure.
recognize it. I don't know if they appreciate it, um, but yeah, they know when it's on,
Cool.
and they know they see. I mean, they come to all the stuff we have, you know, the openings and things, but they can appreciate it and hear it. But you know, from a classical cellist point of view, it's not like their kind of music,
Yeah.
but she still appreciates the music. You know,
That's awesome.
that it's an effort that someone did to put out something different, and this was our take.
That's super
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
you know, and
And different is definitely something I would call y'all's bands, which I guess what is it? Is it kind of surreal, you know, this many years later, and it's kind of like all of a sudden you said seeing this resurgence, and you're kind of just like, you know, the Guardian is doing a write up on the band, and it's just like all these people are just like excited for this group that no one like, you know,
no one will
back in
ever
the
be
day
able
seemed
to
to
get
remember.
to see. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a little bittersweet actually.
Hmm.
Um, it it was what we wanted
Hmm.
when we were together. We couldn't pull it off. You know, we couldn't get music released. I mean, when I met you the other day, we talked about the logistical challenges back in the day. There's no Pro Tools, there's no home recording. Um, I mean, we spent thousands of dollars recording stuff at like Mitch Easter's drive-in studio because that was like the only place you could do it, either that or your cassette player. You know,
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of home recording devices that were readily available or that were any good. Um, and then to release it meant something different than it does today. You
Yeah.
know, this is pre-computers. I
Mm.
mean, it's hard to believe. It's hard to even say that, thinking
Yeah.
like there was a
Seriously.
before, you know, like before, during, and now this is the after period
Hmm.
of a lot of things, right? Cell
Yeah.
phones, computers, but um, it is. I'm glad I got to. Well, of all the people in the band, I'm probably me and Margarita, who lives in Syria. We're the only ones that are really in a position to like hear it and like and enjoy this resurgence. You know, three of the members are dead. Um, one of them is uh, basically homeless on the streets of Athens. I think he has a place to live now, but he's destitute. Um, and then Tim Lacey, he um, he moved to California, I understand, and he just hasn't wanted to be part of it.
Hmm.
Which is his right, right? I mean,
Yeah,
leave me alone. it's the it's the J.D. Salinger approach of, yeah, I did it. So what?
yeah,
Um, uh, but I'm happy for Tim that
for sure.
these are coming out and they can be seen. But he has, Tim he had several Art in the Dark records come out. He recorded with Mitch Easter separately.
Cool.
Yeah, he has. I think I know of three different releases. I think. Um, but yeah, it, you know, is it too little, too late? No, I mean, I'm glad somebody turned this stone over and found it. And that's
Yeah.
really Henry Owings. Um, people have expressed interest in the past,
Mhm.
to me, and they've reached out and asked me this or that, like, hey, ever want to release that? And but no one ever did anything. And
Yeah.
my answer was always the same. Sure, let's talk. Here's my number. Let's
Mhm.
call me. What do you want to do? I have all this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then when Henry and I connected, he was like, anybody ever want to put that stuff out? And I went through the same thing. I'm like, yeah. I said, what do you want to do? And he goes, come over to my house right now.
That's so
And
cool.
and I was like over there like the next day, like here. And it's just been a magical sleigh ride ever since.
Totally, yeah.
Every
And you
day is
definitely got quite
Christmas.
the archive of like old
Yeah.
photos and just recordings. Like I'm glad none of that's just, lost.
Yeah. It took a lot of effort to hang on to it because
Yeah.
like I lost interest in guitars over the years. I was losing faith that it was there. I was like, this is just me a long time ago. I don't need to keep this. And then, I had kids and I thought, well, they'll want to see it someday.
Yeah.
Um, but as the members dropped off, I mean, it became less likely. There was one time when we were all still alive, and about 2005, and I ran into Tim, I ran into Jerry, I ran into Craig. We were all in Athens. There was some event there at the time called the Athens Rewind Party.
Mhm.
They brought back all these. Well, anyways, there was like a reunion of people from the '80s, um, and we were all there. And I was thinking, man, we could actually. And Dominique wasn't there, and we didn't know where she was. But I was thinking, man, we could put this together mostly. But
Yeah.
that's really it never was going to happen. That was never going to happen. Um, and now I can't ever. Yeah, it'd be like one of those bands that's like touring with a second guitar player. I think what do they call them? Leonard Skinner. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, well, I don't know. That's not Carrie. Ricky's one of the original Leonard Skinner guys.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's bands running on the name, but we never had a name that we could run on. It's not like we're Foghat or something.
Yeah.
So it just was never going to happen, though it would have been fun. But we were all older, right?
Yeah.
Hearing loss, jobs.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, for sure.
we got all the things. And then, you have other priorities. And in
Yeah.
Athens, it's so insular. It's like a destination people go to
Yeah, definitely.
for school. That's why I was there. Um, I met
Are you
these
from Georgia
guys.
originally?
Yeah, I grew up here in
Oh,
Atlanta.
okay, cool.
Um,
Nice.
went to Marist High School. Um, I live in Atlanta now. but
Yeah.
I went to Georgia in '79
Cool.
through '84. But all these people coming through, except for Jerry. Jerry lived there. Craig lived there. Tim was there for school. Margarita came there for school from Spain somehow. Dominique
Yeah.
came there from France somehow. Davey was from Dublin, Georgia, which is down south. He was there for school. Um, if you think about it, people come for school and stay. There's people that are there now that we came together and they just stayed. That's
Yeah.
college towns. And there were people who lived there already that had come earlier. I mean, that's because there wasn't much of a reason to come to Athens other than school, really.
Yeah.
Maybe it's different now. But
I feel like everyone comes for the football team. It's like,
Yeah,
and everything else is just like, but
but like
yeah,
to live there and to live and to work and play there, you're there for a reason.
yeah,
And so a lot of bands, they've got like this sell by date, because when you graduate, or if that's the goal, or if you end up doing that and you're going to go on with your whatever, your life, what do you
yeah,
do? It never occurred to me. Well, there was a period where I thought, well, I won't finish college. I'll just do this. I'll be in a band forever and this will be my life. But then when I realized that wasn't going to happen, I was like, oh, I better go study and get out of here.
yeah.
Yeah. And then I
No,
couldn't
for
wait to
sure.
leave.
Yeah,
Like, I got to get out of here. I hear a lot of people say they needed to leave at some point. But,
yeah,
Davey and Dominique moved to France. Margarita moved away. Um, Jerry, hadn't growing up there, um, he had already left and come back. I don't know if you read the Guardian article, but there's a
yeah,
pretty cool part of it about how, Jerry's life before we
yeah.
met him. I mean, um, I mean that's really following your muse and living
No,
your life.
seriously.
And then
Yeah,
like when you realize what you want is not what you have, where do you go get it? And he found it back in Athens, and he
hmm,
lived there till the day he died.
yeah.
No.
No, for sure.
And
It's an interesting town because it's like, you know, you can kind of get that weird like, oh, it's too small. I'm seeing people that I either don't or you don't, necessarily want to see every day, and you kind of just run into people that you know at least or like recognize, and it's kind of like, oh wow, it can feel kind of claustrophobic at times. I feel like maybe.
yeah, yeah. I met these guys from a band out of Chicago, and they were talking about how they got together, and it's completely different than a college band get together. Like in college, for all those reasons that you're bumping into each other over and over and over again,
Yeah,
and you're in the same circles, and then and everybody's um, there's a lot more friction, more people bumping into each other than
yeah,
like in a big town like Chicago. Like, how do you meet? Um, anyway, it's like a different, like all those New York bands,
hmm,
where they like put an ad in the paper or something.
yeah,
It's a harder way to um, organically get together.
hmm.
But
No, for
I don't
real.
know. That's the thing I liked about Athens was like we would be practicing or rehearsing something, and somebody else would come along, and we would drift. People would drift in and out, and then we'd played something else, and people. Probably you too, but people were always in like more than one band
Yeah,
just because, like, hey, you want to come play drums on this thing for me? Okay.
hmm,
Hey, you want to play bass on that? Yeah, sure. Come, come help us out, or come do this, or play on this song with us. Um, a lot of people were doing that, um, which is just a cool way to. I mean, like drummers especially because they're so hard to get. They're like
yeah.
in two or three bands. They're
Definitely.
yeah, they're
I had to cut my losses with a couple of them just because I was like, I'm way
well,
too overwhelmed right now. But
yeah, yeah, but yeah, there always seemed like there wasn't enough drummers.
yeah,
Uh,
I don't think there ever will be.
too many guitarists. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There are too many. Yeah, you shake a stick at everybody, and it's just like, yeah,
yeah,
everyone can play guitar, but
you know.
for sure. But well, I guess you came around after I guess Limbo had came up with the name. Do you remember, or if they told you kind of what the name meant, or if it meant anything at all?
That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that, but according to Craig, um, who named it, him and Davey named it. Um, at the time, and in the '60s and '70s, there was this TV show called The Outer Limits, and
Hmm.
then there was another one called The Twilight Zone,
Oh yeah.
and they were real similar shows. But Rod Serling had this show called The Twilight Zone,
Mhm.
and that appealed to Craig especially, and he changed it around a little bit
Yeah,
to the Limbo District.
that's super cool. That's
Yeah,
really awesome.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny.
that.
Like a lot of references are from when we were younger. I mean,
Mhm.
it can't be helped. like I remember I was listening to this band who was back in the day, um, and they were doing a cover, and they
Hmm.
were doing a cover of a Gang of Four song, which was like contemporary. It was like a then thing. And
Yeah.
now it seems like, I mean, that was 40 years ago, right? Now it's like doing a cover of a band from 40 years ago. It's very
Mm.
unusual.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's yeah, but so that little slice of time that you're in, that's where your influences are.
Hmm.
Um, and you hope that in the future they don't seem super dated, or
Yeah.
or corny or something, but you have no control over that.
Hmm.
The way language changes and things that might not be important anymore. But
Yeah.
every kid watched the Twilight Zone. It's,
Yeah.
it's such a cool
No, for
show.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I still watch that when I get the chance, but yeah, that's something I grew up on. That's really cool to
Yeah.
hear. That's yeah, the parallel between that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was firmly entrenched when I got here.
Hmm. That's really cool. And then yeah, I guess I remember you were saying that y'all's songwriting process kind of stemmed from more of like the poetry at first. You said like Craig's poetry,
Yeah.
kind of.
Craig spent all his time writing. He called it poetry. He was writing lyrics, but he was right. He had and not being a writer myself. I don't know everybody's creative way of doing it, but the way we did it was musically, we would be rehearsing stuff we had already done, and then we would just naturally delve into other stuff, just noise, coming up with
Mhm.
stuff because we had all this time, and in our studio, and so we're there, and somebody will do something, and somebody will do something else, and I might have had a preconceived note or something before I came in, which was thrown away immediately because it didn't sound good like I thought it did. But we'd spend, I don't know, hours. It seemed like days, but we'd spend like half a day in there sometimes. And and occasionally Davey would say something like, that thing you were doing, that one, yeah, do that, but make it, don't ascend, descend, or keep it neutral. And and Jerry pretty much had his own input about how the rhythm was going to be, but it was basically based on the tempo of what we were coming up with. And and then the organ would come in, and we're trying to find our own spots in the song. This is, I don't know much about music theory, but in jazz they talk about leaving space.
Mhm.
um, if the bass is playing this register and you're playing this register, I don't want to be playing notes in the same register because it gets muddled and it's lost. So we consciously tried not to step on each other's toes, but that's kind of like an old blues thing too, because that's the way blues musicians would talk, like, get off my road, like the bass player would tell the pianist,
Yeah.
because if they're in the same area. But we consciously tried to paint this picture where it was posed right, and we basically had Davey to help us do that.
Hmm.
He wasn't a trained musician. He played the bass. He had never played it before, but he knew what he liked, and he um he turned me on to the cramps. So I was fine with him telling me what sounded good and what didn't, and he had a really great ear. But while we were doing all that, Craig had a whole book of stuff he had written, of poems, and he had experimented with them. And on those live recordings, I can actually hear on the earliest stuff, I can hear where he's experimenting with lyrics that ended up later on songs we did that we actually fully fleshed out. And I thought that was really cool, was hearing something like a snippet, like, oh, I heard that before. That's the progression of songs, as you work on them and change them. And at the end, 2 or 3 years later, it sounds like this versus when you first did it here. I always found that interesting, that um, songs just don't get written and that's the way it stays. It's like
Yeah.
it has a life and it's living, and you change it and stretch it and add things. Davey was great with adding things. Tim too. When Tim was playing guitar, he was coming in after Margarita, who had her own style of playing. And one thing Tim did with the band was as they were going into the studio at Mitch Easter's. I mean, this was his philosophy, as he told me, was you got to have, you can't go in there and noodle around, when you're paying by the hour. You
Yeah.
gotta you gotta have it set. And so they rehearsed, they got all their parts the way they were going to have them, so that when they went into the studio, they could reproduce it.
Yeah.
And it's not the time to improvise, when you're paying for it. You can do that live or elsewhere. But so Tim, when he joined and helped get them together as a unit to like solidify certain songs, especially the five that were on this Mitch Easter recording, um, because somebody had to, because
Yeah.
undisciplined people who don't really know what they're doing, they just play it the way they want to play it. But I do think it's important to like have a plan and a framework. And now there is some magic that happens a lot, when you're recording. Um, but if you just go in there willy nilly, it's going to sound terrible. And
Yeah.
you're gonna have to pay a lot of money to have somebody like, well, can you do it again? Let's take a second take. Oh, I don't know what I did. I mean, you got to have it down. So that was kind of how Tim then after that was able to teach me these songs, was the way they had formed them. So they were formed, um, which was kind of interesting, because they morphed a little bit afterwards, like everything does. But um, I always think that Tim brought some structure to the songs, whereas when you listen to some of the older ones, they were they were really cool ideas, and they would just go.
Yeah.
But if you want to make it into and this, I don't know, maybe this kind of takes some of the magic out of it, but you gotta, it's still music, and if you're gonna put it on physical disc that people can play, it has a time limit, and it's got to have, and you want to have like more than one song on a 45 or a EP or an LP. So you have to formalize something. You have to come up with some kind of thing, and it may stop the forming of the song at a certain point. But if without it, you don't really have a song to record. Anyway, I'm beating that to death. But I always liked that Tim was able to do that with stuff that wasn't really you weren't able to do that with. It was really
Yeah.
unformed, and he formed it. And I'm sure it wasn't easy, but
No, yeah. That
made it
takes a lot
easy
of
to learn
skill
the
to be able
songs.
to, yeah, like hear the kind of song out of like that cacophony of just kind of like, all right, how are we gonna get all these like interest, like, yeah, because it's like kind of, yeah, you were saying explaining like exploring the noise aspect and trying to pull a song together so it's not just like noise,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I don't know if you've ever heard of I just been watching this documentary on this group from Canada called the Nihilist Spasm Band.
I've never heard of them.
They were like around for 30 years and would play like the same club every Monday night, but they were just like all noise, just like make their own instruments and stuff. But and the guy would just rant over top of it. But no, so it's interesting hearing kind of like, you got that aspect of the
Yeah,
spectrum and then being able to, yeah, like find the like definitely Limbo District's a very rhythm centered, I feel like, group. And you kind of like listen with headphones, especially you can hear all the layers in it, and it's just like all the parts are working together really well. Like you said, you're giving each other space. So that's really like definitely I think a hard thing to do is to be able to kind of like, pull that together. So it's
yeah.
cool that he's
Well,
able
I
to.
always appreciated Davy's efforts at keeping the bass simple.
Mhm.
Um, he was capable of playing. He got really good at it, and he could do. He had a he had a slap technique he used. He had a pull string technique he used. And I don't know where he learned those, but he didn't know how to play the bass, and then he did.
Mhm.
But he kept it simple, dum 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 dum. But that allowed everybody else to do their thing, and it
Yeah.
allowed the drums, the percussion to be everything. Um, but Davey knew that he was the low end, not like the backbeat, of a rock and roll band, but
Yeah.
he knew that that was the rhythm that was the loudest that carried through every song.
Yeah.
Not the guitar, the organ was the melody, the drums were like that was kind of like that was like the heart beating.
Yeah,
But Davey
for real.
just, that low down boom 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 boom. I love that. And
Hmm.
he was able to come up with different interesting bass parts. Um, being basically an untrained bass player. But
Yeah,
that's pretty much everybody in Athens at one point or other was never picked up an instrument and now they're a guitar player.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I always appreciated that. I mean, I don't know if I guess he knew it was his role or but that was just how he played, and now we defaulted to that anyway. And now when
yeah.
you hear songs, I mean, we start off with the bass on a lot of songs just because
Hmm.
that starts the whole thought process of how we were thinking about it, on songs when they would come
Yeah,
out.
that's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
That's awesome.
But
Well,
I have no idea how Dominique came up with all these melodies she came up with on the organ. Um, Being French, a lot of them sounded like an opera. The
yeah,
way they would come in and she was, there's if you ever seen all these organs from the 60s and 70s, they have like 1,000 flips and switches and stuff.
yeah,
But if you move them and do things with them, you can get all these weird like vacillations, like I mean, you can make them warble
yeah, totally.
um, it had a lot of range for just an organ, which was like, like 3 feet long. It was old, rickety, but you could flip those switches and all the switches worked, but you would get these her combination of them with the melodies that were coming out of her head, which were like, I swear they're like from operas. They seemed like opera singers. And then Craig had really cool ones too. And I think he was super motivated or um, um, influenced by Dominique's playing. And of
Yeah.
course, I don't think she ever, I mean, I don't know. Maybe she's European. Maybe she knew how to play piano. I don't know. I don't think so. Didn't seem like it. Um, like I'd say, hit a C so I can tune my guitar, and she didn't know whether it was like where.
That's
Yeah,
pretty funny.
yeah,
That's cool. And then I know you said that your influences you kind of like came out of like Neil Young and Kiss and was there kind of like bands that y'all all were kind of like agreeing was like, "Oh yeah, this is like we're all kind of into this right now," or anything that
yeah.
y'all were kind of like influencing your sound off of? Or I mean, it just sounds so unique and original, and there's definitely that comparison I've seen be made to y'all and like the no wave scene in New York, which there's like that connection. Like one of the
No.
members' brothers was in like
Yeah,
Teenage Jesus and the Jerks.
yeah. Davy's brother Gordon was one of the bass players in Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. Um, and some of his recordings are on that No New York album that Brian Eno put out, that compilation. Um, I didn't know about No New York until I went to New York and saw No New York, saw it in person and met Gordon. Um, but when I heard that album, being young and stupid, I didn't put two and two together. But it was a big influence on Davey. But actually, one of Davy's favorite bands that he used to work out to was the Ramones.
Oh yeah.
He just loved the Ramones. Um, I love the Ramones, but that we all agreed on. There weren't many actually. We all had really like when we would be driving somewhere and putting cassettes in the car, we'd all get sick of each other's music. It's like I don't want to hear any more of that, African drum beat or whatever Dominique was playing. And
Yeah.
we didn't have earbuds and we couldn't keep it to ourselves. It was like a
Hmm.
bunch of cassettes sticking in the cassette deck of the van we were driving.
Yeah.
Everybody had their own musical identity. Jerry was super interested in just more primitive beats and
Hmm.
sounds. I remember I couldn't tell you what it was called, but I remember listening in his house to him playing these drum things just over and over and over again, and they were just so out there, and I didn't know where they were coming from, and I think most of the time they were like African. I think there were some from Brazil. Um, and then he had a whole host of different percussion instruments.
Cool.
that I'd never seen before, but now I know what they are. But they were, they kind of influenced what you could do, and he was able to take all that influence and reproduce in percussion what people do on drum sets. He stood there and he had no bass drum, and he would add and subtract from his kit. Stuff would get stolen. We'd have to replace it. I mean,
Yeah.
the music business sucks. People people will steal your guitar and leave
Yeah.
you stranded, and you're like,
Mhm.
oh my God, who does that to
Yeah.
people?
Seriously.
Um, I know a lot of bands that ended up having all their stuff stolen. I mean, more, I mean, that story is as old as music.
Hmm.
Um, but but that, Jerry had that music. Dominique, I'm not really sure I ever really heard her listening to music. That's which is kind of hitting me now. And Craig and I, we'd talk about different 70s and 60s bands. Um, but Davey liked the Ramones, and he liked the Cramps, and he liked that kind of rockabilly sound.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, and but uh, but that was what was available too to hear. Um, but me, after I got into college and with this band, and my horizons were widened for sure. So I got to listen to all their stuff, and things I never would have heard of before. Um, but at the same time, other bands around the world were coming out, like the Smiths were coming out, but we kind of dismissed them because they were kind of, well, they were the Smiths in the early '80s. They sounded soft.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I love the Smiths now, but I did not appreciate them at the time they came out.
Yeah.
Um, and there were a lot of bands that were coming in the early '80s. But most of the bands I listened to were Athens bands.
That's cool.
Because I could go out any night and hear an Athens band somewhere, and if
Yeah.
Pylon was playing or Love Tractor, um, or the Barbecue Killer, I mean, all these bands
Hmm.
that were available, they were what I wanted to go see. I think I saw every Art in the Dark show.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, I mean, plus they're all your friends, right?
Yeah.
And plus, for the most part, every door has a guest list and you're on it. So
Yeah.
it's like you just walk in and out, and it doesn't cost you money to go to
Hmm.
clubs. You could go listen and enjoy all this music. And now, if it did have a cover, it might have been $2,
Yeah.
which I mean, imagine that, right? I mean,
That would be, yeah.
it's unbelievable, right? That's like,
Seriously.
yes, it's not,
$10 minimum these days.
yeah, it's crazy economics that have changed, but
Hmm.
the freedom of being able to walk around and experience it. And then the house parties, which everybody talks about, but they were real because
Hmm.
in Athens on Friday, everything closed at 1, and on Saturday it closed at midnight because there's no drinking on Sunday in
Hmm.
Athens back in the day due to the Georgia blue laws
Yeah.
about alcohol sales. So Saturday at midnight, where do you go? You're awake.
Hmm.
You're up. What are we going to go? And it was
Yeah.
always party, 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 party. And that's when bands would choose to, like, hey, we're gonna play on there. Like, oh yeah, see you there. Yeah,
That's so
a
cool.
house
Yeah.
band. Yeah. And there wasn't much barriers to entry for starting bands. I mean, I guess there's not now either, but it's just nowhere to play as much, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely, and I feel like, with COVID, that closed a lot of venues. And, now there's definitely some stuff coming back, new places, but it just doesn't feel different. It's not catering to kind of like maybe the cooler bands, that are doing stuff. It's more for like, oh yeah, we're gonna have, and even just like the pairing of bills, it's like they'll have some really cool out of town band come through and just play with just someone who just doesn't mix, or just, which I love the mixed bills, but it's just like people who just, yeah, it just doesn't
Yeah.
really like work as well. But yeah, well, I live in a house right now that does shows, and we're trying to keep that house shows and
Oh
have just
wow.
cool bands come through a lot. So
Yeah, I think like every weekend we had a band sleeping in our house in Athens.
yeah.
They're coming through on their way to somewhere else, and I'd wake up in the morning, there'd be sleeping bags everywhere,
Yeah.
and that's like, and we do the same thing. Like we're in another town at the show, somebody would say, "You need a place to stay," and be like, "Oh yeah, man, where can we stay?" And we'd be like, you wake up in the morning and you're like in somebody's house, like, oh man, where are we? Oh yeah, we're in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah.
Staying at somebody that was at the show's house that let us stay for the night. I mean,
Hmm.
that part was great. The camaraderie and and then you see them again next time, or they'd come to Athens and you get to hang out with them there. But
Yeah.
yeah, all these bands that were coming to Athens at the time. I lived in this big house. Well, it was called it's where um it was called Cobb Manor, and it actually ended up it was a really old house. And when I moved out, Pete Buck bought it.
Really.
And when he got divorced, his wife has it. She still lives in it, to my
Hmm.
understanding. But there were like 12 people in the house. I mean,
Yeah.
it was huge. Like 3 levels. I lived in the back. There's people everywhere, and
Totally.
there would always be somebody on the couch
Yeah.
sleeping. But like on weekends when bands were coming through, it was just everywhere. Um, yeah, and I remember staying in weird people's houses, you
Hmm.
know, because otherwise we have to sleep in the van, which I
Yeah,
did many times. Not so bad.
for sure.
At least you can protect your gear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That's true, for sure. Cool. Well, is there any advice you would give to like, bands, just starting out or wanting to pursue, I guess, more unique sounding music, not trying to go with the flow or anything.
yeah. I think that I, I, this is kind of uh, not fatherly advice. It's 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 the way I wish somebody had told me when I was doing it was don't listen to club owners, record companies, people in the music business telling you what you need to sound like. Um, you sound like you sound based on, well, one thing, your limitations, like what do I have that I can put into music and your skill level, but mostly your imagination.
Yeah,
Because if you listen to other people and they tell you what to do, you end up you change and
yeah,
not for the better. And there's never been an AR person from a music company that ever picked the right band at the right time. Like you hear about stories like the guys that turned the Beatles down, right? Like, oh, I don't hear anything commercial there. I mean, those guys, they don't know any more than you do.
yeah,
They don't. And the same thing with club owners and record companies and radio stations. They only know what they know, but the only way you can differentiate yourself is to whatever's in your head is to get it out and play it the way you think so. And we always felt that they're either going to appreciate it for what it is because it's our own unadulterated product, or they're not going to like it. And like I've mentioned several times, we cleared several rooms when we would play clubs
yeah.
because people had they were thinking we were going to be R.E.M. or something from Athens or Pylon.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, that's not them at all, right? But we played our thing.
Totally.
We did our thing. We didn't care that we had a lot of people or no people.
Yeah,
We just did it because that's what we thought was important to play. And we were able to not change it based on people's influence. 'Cause like we
yeah.
wanted to get on MTV, but we'd have had to
Mhm.
change all this stuff. And we're like, we
Yeah,
can't
it
do
just wouldn't have
that.
been worth it.
No, we wanted to open for big bands, but we could never do that because
Hmm.
I mean, there are lots of bands in Athens that were on tour and had bands that went with them, but we weren't going to be that. We weren't going to open for the B-52s,
Yeah.
and their fans. So, the people who appreciated us got to see us. The people who didn't appreciate us just didn't appreciate it. That's just the way it is. But I'm glad we never did things differently
Yeah.
because 40 years later, the only reason people are remembering us is because we did things differently. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we'd be just another one of those. R.E.M. jingly guitar sounding bands from the 80s, which there were a
Yeah.
lot of,
Too many.
and
Yeah.
I don't remember their names anymore.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, I don't know, if you're shooting for posterity in 40 years,
Keep it original
do your thing.
integrity. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your mileage may vary, but just depends on, at the time when our minds were set on music, that was our philosophy.
Yeah.
And all the rest is just superfluous.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, I listen to your stuff and I think, and the way you're able to even produce videos and things, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is amazing that
Thanks.
that it can't, first off, it's even possible because like I'm catching up, but that I love the sound, I love the beats, I love the whole stereophonic effects. I mean, it all gets me. I like it a lot.
Thanks so
Um,
much. I appreciate
yeah,
you checking it out.
yeah, that was because like I'm wondering, like I've had a few people interview me, and I listen to their stuff, and I mean, most of the time, I love everybody's stuff. I don't think I've ever heard anybody's that wanted to talk to me that I didn't like their stuff. I don't know
Cool.
why that is, but I guess because if they don't like my stuff, we're not talking. Right?
Yeah.
We're not gonna have we have nothing to talk about. Um, but one thing I've always like I kid my wife. The thing I liked most about her was that she was crazy about me.
Mhm.
So, I like people. I like to talk to people who are interested in the band.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to. I mean, I'm not in the defending our band. What the hell are we thinking kind of thing. Like, yeah, we did it. We did it this
Yeah.
way. There's other
No,
ways to
totally.
do it. Go find what you like. But when you connect with somebody who has a nice word to say,
Hmm.
like, yeah, let's explore that. That's fun. Plus it's not for everybody, and I don't like everybody's all their music, but I've always loved music. It's just
Yeah.
I wish it could have been a bigger part of my life. Um, but that didn't work out. But I get to ride this wave of
Yeah.
releases, and it's yeah, I said it's bittersweet. Well, for one reason, well, because three of them are dead, right? I wish they could all have experienced it.
Yeah.
And one of them's kind of like not really they're not really reachable.
Hmm.
Craig, we can't really get a hold of him. So I feel like me and Margarita are enjoying it for the ones that aren't here.
Yeah.
and and it kind of I don't think it I don't think it justifies anything we did or how we played. I think it's just cool that someone's
Totally.
thinking about it 40 years later because I never would have thought that. Um,
Totally.
but it's a cool ride. I know it won't last forever, but at least it happened, and
For
um, and
sure.
now it's for posterity's sake with
Yeah.
actual music.
Totally.
Because when I met you the other day, I mentioned that back in the day, the thing everybody wanted to hear was their song on the radio,
Hmm.
right? And now there's no radio,
Yeah.
so I get to drive around now, and every now and then I can go to Spotify and play our own song, and it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, yeah, there it is. I can just reach out and play it.
Hmm.
Anyway, it's surreal, really.
No, totally. I
Yeah,
bet.
yeah. But I mean, it wouldn't have happened without Chunklet Music Preservation Society and Henry Owings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That guy's awesome for keeping up with all these bands and stuff.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I'm in debt to him. Yep,
hell yeah.
yep.
It's awesome.
And people like you who hear something interesting that they want to know a little bit more about.
For sure, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I'm super glad that, yeah, this is all happening because, like, definitely just with the state of everything these days, it's kind of just like some music I feel like people need to hear, and just like do whatever too. But no, I'm really glad that Limbo District was able to exist and that it's kind of, able to now be digitized for forever now, which is really cool, and just have some physical copies. And
yeah.
yeah,
For the
it's really
longest
cool.
time, it existed on a cassette player, on a cassette in my closet.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was it. That was the extent of it. Yeah, slowly
totally.
deteriorating.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm excited for the new releases, and thank you. Is there anything else that you'd want to talk about? before we hang up?
Um, you know, there's this place in Athens called Nusi Space,
Oh yeah, it's right down
and
the street.
yeah, and my understanding is they were able to help Craig out with some of his issues.
Hmm.
If anybody's so inclined, that's a great place to donate money or time
Definitely.
or resources. Um, Mental health has always been not overlooked, brushed aside. But people we know, people it affects everybody, and it can be a lifelong problem for folks. And that there's anybody doing anything about it in a private way like Nusi Space, I think that's worth remembering. Um,
Definitely. Yeah.
I think
I'll
I
put
think
a
that's
link to Nucci's website down in
yeah,
the video description once this gets posted for sure.
yeah. I mean, it's I mean, I don't know if Craig could have gotten more stable if it hadn't been for their help.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Anyway,
that place is very cool. I'm very glad that they're able to keep a place open like that for musicians because like you said, yeah, I feel everybody's got stuff, but especially like musicians tend to kind of have more, I feel like, just things that you might need help with from other people and stuff.
yeah,
So which is
yeah,
glad there's
yeah,
that
yeah.
people
Got to look
care.
out. Got
Yeah.
to look out for each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Sully. I appreciate
Of
your time
course. And
and your patience and dragging me and getting me here.
oh no, thank you so much for
Yeah.
doing this interview. I'm so glad we were able to talk. And yeah, if I come up with any other questions that I missed, I guess I can email them to you.
Oh yeah,
But
definitely. And I'll send
yeah.
you the links when I get them
Okay,
when I figure
awesome.
out where they
Thanks so
are.
much.
Yeah, you bet.
Cool.
Have a good
All
night.
right, Kelly, you have a good night too.
Bye,
Good talking
Sully.
with you.
Bye.
Bye.